in that moment, I think you can see in the clip, like the progression of my facial expression of realizing like just what exactly he was asking me. And like the whole, like, if we're going to go there, we're really going to go there. Because I think, Fox and these conservative outlets, they almost dare you to call them out on their hypocrisy. And what is more hypocritical than pretending to care about children when you're protecting a president and an entire Epstein class of individuals that have more corroborating evidence against them than really most things we see in politics these days.
Welcome to the Politics Chicks. I'm Christy Branham.
And I'm Monica Healy.
Today we are joined by Oliver Larkin, who was already shaking up a very contentious Florida primary against incumbent Jared Moskowitz when he went viral for a particular moment on Fox News.
Larkin has been turning heads nationally, not just because of the politics he's running on, but because he's willing to take those ideas straight to the lion's den. For real. And with the primary just one day away, he believes voters are ready to choose a very different kind of Democrat. Oliver, welcome to the Politics Chicks.
Thanks so much for having me on, Monica, Christy. It's great to meet you all, and very glad to be on here right before the primary.
Well, we're excited to have you. We were just tickled when we heard back from your comps person that you would be able to come on with us for a few minutes today. So let's make the most of the short amount of time we have together and start off with talking about that interview on Fox. You were pretty masterful in how you handled the line of questioning with Trace Gallagher, who clearly was trying to control the narrative. What were you thinking in that moment? And were you surprised about how viral it went? And how that has actually kind of impacted your campaign?
Yeah, I was trying to give a real cogent answer because he was asking these very inflammatory questions about immigrants. They were doing the whole Fox News setup where they play footage of migrants crossing the border from Morocco into Spain. And he started out asking, shouldn't people in America be afraid of this happening in our country? And I said, there's nothing to be afraid of with people seeking a better life in the United States. And he said, well, what about the crimes that immigrants commit? And I said, we have a legal justice system that adjudicates people for crimes, whether they're immigrants or U.S. born citizens. And then he went down the line of asking about crimes against children. And in that moment, I think you can see in the clip, like the progression of my facial expression of realizing like just what exactly he was asking me. And like the whole, like, if we're going to go there, we're really going to go there. Because I think, Fox and these conservative outlets, they almost dare you to call them out on their hypocrisy. And what is more hypocritical than pretending to care about children when you're protecting a president and an entire Epstein class of individuals that have more corroborating evidence against them than really most things we see in politics these days. So I kind of knew, like, just going through my head, like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to go there. But I left the mobile studio van, and I was so mad at the line of questioning that I was like furiously texting my team that I didn't even realize like the viral potential of it. I was just like, he pushed me and I had to go there. And then it was until it went online that we really saw, how resonant it was, because I think so many other people shared my outrage at just the line of question and the hypocrisy. So I'm glad it resonated because, I think I have a responsibility, and all candidates have a responsibility to go into places that may not necessarily agree with us, but as public servants, as aspiring public officials, we have a responsibility to speak to everyone in our district. And I think that was a real case in point of how to do that without backing off of our values.
My immediate reaction was, now that's what I'm talking about. Like, more of this.
More people calling out exactly what you did. And you've been on Fox a lot, and that's not common for a Democratic candidate or a Democratic Socialist candidate. But I equated it to Christy. I remember watching Pete Buttigieg over and over and over, and he's willing to go and do that. And I think we need more of that. So what is it about you that kept you going back?
Yeah, I think Secretary Buttigieg is a great example that you can go onto these platforms and convey a point of view without buying into the kind of macro narrative that they're trying to construct. And For me, I know that in this current media environment, running as a first-time grassroots candidate against an incumbent who also goes on Fox News and also conveys a point of view, and he can be kind of snappy sometimes with his committee back and forth. But I felt a responsibility that, this kind of contrast of Fox News, right-wing media interviewing a Democratic socialist, that it might be a kind of good made-for-TV moment. But I also think that showing just as much that I'm running to fix and change the makeup of the Democratic Party and make it more accountable to the grassroots and to working people, I also want to show voters in my district that I'm just as willing to go into the lion's den and that I can hold my own and really stand by our party's values. And I think that is something that voters have really resonated with. We've heard so much that people want me to keep going back on. It's not, I think, what we've maybe been fearful of or heard in previous times of, oh, don't go on there, don't platform them. Why would you waste your time? I think showing that I can go on there and hold my own, and then sharing those clips and packaging them for a wider audience, people are like, wow, maybe we can. And I think we're in a moment where people too are just tired of kind of being in our information silos and our respective corners of the boxing ring. I think there's a real appetite because of how unpopular Donald Trump's governance has been among his base with this war with Iran. He ran on ending wars. Now we're 6 months into an embroiled and illegal war that did not have the consent of Congress. He ran on addressing the cost of inflation, and now we see gas prices going up. We see 2/3 of Americans unable to afford their groceries. And it's been really insightful for me kind of sitting in the green room before these TV hits and hearing them talk about in Fox News polling the unpopularity of Donald Trump on so many of these different positions, because people feel betrayed. And 10 years into this Trump era, a lot of his voters in the MAGA movement, they feel fatigued and their lives haven't materially changed in the way that he promised. And so I think this is a new opportunity for us to build a new political constituency and a new coalition where we can get people who watch Fox News and they enjoy their Social Security and their Medicare, and they want to see these programs protected. That maybe it's not Donald Trump who originally campaigned on, I'm a different kind of Republican and I'm not going to touch Social Security or Medicare. Like, maybe it is progressives, maybe it is Democrats that are actually the resolution that so many of these viewers are looking for. And I think they're just waiting to see someone like Secretary Buttigieg or like myself go on there and really kind of give them a different perspective that is actually galvanizing and is also treating them with respect. And that's something I try to keep in mind as well, that while the hosts may ask me inflammatory questions, the people watching are looking for solutions to their everyday problems. And that's something that we need to keep in mind is front of mind when we're going on there.
I love that, because you're meeting gettable. We don't know if these people are gettable or not, right? Because like you said, a lot of people are just so disenchanted. I mean, we see these polls about Trump's abysmal approval rating. So we don't know if these voters are gettable or not, but we'll never know if you're not willing to go and meet them where they coalesce, right? So I just think that is absolutely brilliant. But let's turn away from the whole Fox viral moment thing and talk more about your campaign, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what made you in this moment decide that this was the time for you to run for Congress.
Yeah, my background is 10 years as a progressive organizer. I graduated college in 2015 with a mountain of student loan debt. I was working a minimum wage job as a line cook when I saw Bernie Sanders launch his campaign for president. Florida had just reelected our then governor, Rick Scott, who was banning state employees from using terms like climate change. So I really felt like I needed to do more to prevent that kind of outcome in my state. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale and love Florida dearly. So I was inspired to join the Sanders campaign, and I've spent a decade unionizing my workplace with the News Guild Communication Workers of America, working with labor unions, with nonprofits, with efforts like 2018's Amendment 4 campaign in Florida with New Florida Majority to restore voting rights to over 1 million Floridians. So I've been an organizer. I've been someone who has been perfectly content to support other candidates for office, other Democratic Party officials and progressives, and feel that I was doing my part to make a positive impact on the world. But when I saw the direction that our state took, I moved back here after living in DC for a few years after the Sanders campaign. I moved back home during COVID, and really coincided with seeing our state move so far to the right that I just felt like I needed to do more, especially after 2024. So this has been a real full circle moment for me after I was inspired to work on another progressive candidate's campaign for president, that I decided to be the candidate that I waited for so long to see. And really, a moment for me that made this clear was in April of last year. One of our local indivisible groups, Hope in Action, which is doing extraordinary work, they had a town hall meeting that was so well attended. It was 450 people, like packed to the rafters of the United Church of Christ in Fort Lauderdale. And they invited Rick Scott and Ashley Moody and our 3 Democratic members of Congress. And no one showed up. There was an aide for one of the other members, Sheila Chairfullis McCormick at the time, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz sent a pre-recorded video and helped defray some of the cost with snacks. But Jared Moskowitz just did not respond to their invitation. And when the event organizers announced that, there was an open microphone, and people started booing. People went up to the open mic and said, "We have to primary this guy." And these were older voters. These were dyed-in-the-wool, true blue Democrats that really understand that the taking back the House majority in November of 2026 was of the utmost importance, and yet they did not feel that they were being heard from someone who was the first Democrat in Congress to join Doge and the only Democrat in our state delegation to vote for the Larkin-Riley Act after Donald Trump promised mass detention and deportation. So that for me was a moment where I was like, maybe there's something here. Maybe this is an election where there really is an appetite for change. And for myself, I think one of the most interesting parts of this campaign, running as a Democratic Socialist in a closed primary, in a toss-up race in a Republican-held state, is we are actively building the bridge in real time to get disaffected voters, to get non-party affiliated voters, to get young people to understand that if you are not registered with a political party in the state of Florida, you are disenfranchised. You cannot participate in party primaries. And that's oftentimes where the direction and the shape and the prioritization of these political parties is determined. So I've been very proud to be building that on-ramp and getting people engaged in the political process, because at the same time that I'm a Democratic Socialist, I'm also someone who was inspired to register as a Democrat at 16 years old when Barack Obama was running for president the first time. So I see this as really building one of the tent poles of the Democratic Party constituency and building a broad-based electoral coalition that it's going to take to take back power in states like Florida. And I think that's something that we've really been doing to reach across this divide and to get people in the Democratic Party establishment to see that, we are working in coalition together, that we all want many of the same things, whether you call yourself a progressive or a Democratic Socialist or just a Democrat, but you believe in Medicare for all and universal child care and paid family and medical leave. Policies, by the way, that the Florida Democratic Party Rules Committee just adopted as part of their party platform. So we see that the American people as a whole want and support progressive policies. And so the different vehicles that we are in through our organizing apparatuses, through DSA or through the Democratic Party, we all share a lot of the same ultimate goals. And I think that's been what's so galvanizing about this campaign, is also developing the leadership and the organizing infrastructure. We've got so many young people that are so inspired by this campaign. We've got 500, 600, 700 volunteers on this campaign that are phone banking, that are canvassing. And that development of people's organizing acumen, that's how I got started. I started out as a field organizer before I was ever a candidate. When we look at Mayor Zoran Mamdani, he was working on campaigns before he ever ran for office himself. So I've just been so heartened by this kind of coalition that we've been building, and knowing that whatever happens tomorrow, and of course we have very high hopes as well as for November, but this is about changing the trajectory in Florida for the long term, and I'm very proud to have played a small part in it. And it wouldn't be possible without everyone else that's been part of our coalition.
You've talked about Florida moving to the right, and I think we have seen that across the country. And there is a shift Heather Cox Richardson, author, professor, historian, has talked about how the Overton window has shifted so much that the Democrat, what they present now that is perceived as extreme, is something that the Republican Party in the 1950s was advocating for in their national platform. So the word socialist becomes a scare tactic, right? So your opponents want to hear what that means and why it's not so extreme. So what does democratic socialism mean to Oliver Larkin, and what does it not mean?
Yeah, it means having democratic control over the systems that govern our lives. In the United States, we're the highest income nation on earth, not to guarantee healthcare is a right, and we pay twice as much per capita as other peer nations with worse outcomes. I want to see our energy economy move towards 100% renewable energy. And there are just some instances in which the market forces are at odds with what we need as a prerogative to protect our planet, to protect humanity. So I want to see more public ownership of utilities and of the energy industry so that we can actually implement not just 100% renewable energy, but environmental restoration and creating the jobs that we need. I want to see us expand our public education system. We saw public schools established in the Reconstruction era after the Civil War and the emancipation of freed slaves. So in this current day and age when childcare costs on average $13,000 a year, and the cost of a college education puts people tens of thousands of dollars into debt, I want to see us expand what public education means on either end of the spectrum in those early critical childhood development years, so that parents can also afford to work, because in this economy, many times two-parent households need multiple incomes to be able to afford to get by. And I don't want to see people have to pick and choose because they can't find reliable childcare for themselves. And in the same vein, I don't want to see people forego college or vocational or trade schools because they can't afford the cost of the education. So I think it is about having more democratic input over these systems, not just democracy at the ballot box, but democracy in our economy and how we collectively make these decisions over where our taxpayer dollars are spent and how they're going to be allocated in universal ways, not through means testing, not through saying that this group is going to get this benefit and that group is excluded from it. I think that when we all have an equal stake in the game, then we all are equally invested in programs like Social Security or like Medicare. I would like to see these programs expanded. I would like to see the taxable income cap on Social Security lifted so that the extreme wealthy and billionaires pay the same share that working class people do. And I want to see Medicare expanded to cover vision, hearing, dental, mental health care, reproductive health care, because we already see the popularity of this program. And yet there are these carve-outs that are rife for people paying more in prescription drugs than they need to. So I think that's what democratic socialism means to me. And I also believe in multi-party democracy and protecting our civil and constitutional rights. And I think a lot of the fear-mongering that's done about democratic socialism and trying to ascribe it to communism or one-party ideology, what we see in this country is Donald Trump, his administration, attacking people's freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. I want to protect those. I believe that when we have multi-party democracy, when we have our civil and constitutional rights protected, that is how we have a healthy government, and when we have people's rights respected. So I think that democratic socialism is merely carrying on the tradition of New Deal progressivism, of the advancements of the Great Society and LBJ. It's always come from outside pressure beyond just the institution of the Democratic Party, with the civil rights organizers and the trade unionists. This is how change has always come about in this country. And what we look back on now is some of the greatest successes of American democracy has come from this pressure being applied.
And we know that our time with you is limited. You shared with us before we started recording that you're jumping from Zoom to Riverside to StreamYard and all these different hits today. So we want to be respectful of that. So I want to just give you the opportunity to tell our listeners and viewers, why are you the person that is going to be the best candidate to win the primary tomorrow? And why are you the person who can defeat Republicans and in the election in November?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Christy, and thank you both for having me on. I think the contrast tomorrow is between myself I'm a democratic socialist. I don't run away from the label, but I'm also working to build a governing coalition in Florida that can help us take back the House of Representatives. And I don't want to excise anyone from our political coalition. And I think that's an impulse that I've seen from some in the more center of the party that has troubled me to a degree. I'm not going to tell anyone because they're more moderate or more centrist that they have no place in the Democratic Party. I might have a difference of opinion on who should be representing us, but I know that winning elections is about addition, not subtraction. And so I think that's the same ethos that is going to win us on Tuesday is what's going to win in November. And the contrast here against my opponent, who I mentioned, the first Democrat to join Doge, a self-described Ron DeSantis Democrat with 2 political appointments, the first of which was at the personal behest of Matt Gaetz. This does not represent the values of our party and where we are right now. And so when it comes to standing up to AIPAC and to corporate interests and to taking on the culture of corruption in Washington, D.C., I think this is what is going to be galvanizing to voters in November, when we see a district that is an even third Republican, Democrat, and Independent, and young people overwhelmingly registering as independent, so they are not even yet able to participate in our party's primary, but we need to turn them out in November. That delta between 81 million votes for Joe Biden in 2020 and 74 million for Kamala Harris in 2024, we need to win those people back, and we need to inspire them with a message. And so I think that is what is going to carry us forward. I grew up in a Republican household. I'm more than willing to work in a bipartisan manner on issues. It just depends on, are we working in a bipartisan manner to increase income and wealth inequality, which I will not do, or are we working to expand liberty and freedom, as I think we've seen very, very skillfully Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie working together on the Epstein files or on opposing endless wars. And I think that is the kind of disposition and the kind of coalition building that I'm looking to do in the general election, to make sure that everyone is welcome into our movement, because this is a movement for South Florida. And I think this is what it's going to take to help us do our part to win back the House majority in November.
Oliver Larkin, thank you so much for your time. We're going to be watching closely, as I know the nation is, tomorrow night, as we're watching results roll in from the primary tomorrow. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you so much, Christy.
We are so appreciative of having you on today, Oliver. I know that your schedule was jam-packed, so thank you for taking the time to speak to us today and for giving our listeners and our viewers the opportunity to meet you.
To our listeners, if you're finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, makes you see the world a little differently, please like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Blue Sky, Instagram, Substack, Threads, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thanks, Oliver.
Thank you. So great to meet you both.